Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Found in Interpretation podcast. Once again, I'm one of your co-hosts, Alain Breton, and I'm here with Brian.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode, number 12.
Already? Wow, you're counting.
I'm counting.
And we also have Mercedes Amoretti with us. How you doing, Mercedes?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. So as usual, we're going to read the bio to start with. Of course, Mercedes, not ours. So Mercedes Amoretti is a freelance conference interpreter with English A, French B, and Spanish B. She has over 15 years experience. Her career began at Spanish nuclear power plants, assisting experts from the IAEA and WANO. Do I just say WANO?
Maybe not. They might take offense with that, but
why
not?
All right.
Why not? Maybe over the weekend.
Can I cut it in editing later, post editing later? We'll see. Anyway, she later expanded her work to legal and financial sectors. She holds a bachelor's degree in English literature from the University of London. She has a diploma in interpreting from York University. She is close to completing a postgraduate diploma in legal translation at McGill University. I did not know that. You're keeping things from me.
Because it's a work in progress of like 3 credits to go.
And finally, she's currently
out of the bag.
Yeah, pressure is on.
Well, let me just to finish that part. She's currently based in Montreal, working in private conference interpreting market. All right.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
All right. Hello, everyone.
You sound much better than what I would have done myself, but thank you for that.
Well, my pleasure. So it all started in Spain from the very first thing that I see, right?
Yeah, everything, the whole interpretation career launched in Spain out of the blue. I was living and working in Spain, not as an interpreter. I had gone there to learn Spanish, and I kind of just landed up staying there for the longest time because I realized after a year, you don't learn a language the way you need to learn a language to be able to communicate. And I really liked it over there. And I ended up working in nuclear power plants as an interpreter since I had English and French in my language combination. So I'm an English A, but I think I've been referred to as an academic A because my mother tongue is French. So okay. Yeah, it's a bit of I'm a whatever that means.
And where in Spain? Like all over Spain? Or?
Yeah, so I was a bit everywhere. Yeah, I started off in Madrid. Madrid was I lived there for 11 years, and during that time I also lived 2 years in Guadalajara, which is about 45 clicks out to northwest of Madrid, and that's where the nuclear has kicked in because there's a big nuclear power plant. It's a German built, and Trio. It's a small village in Guadalajara, the province of Guadalajara. So that's where it all started.
Just to we're not all familiar with the map of Spain.
In my head it's super clear.
So where north, south, east, west?
Just next door. Come on, seriously.
I was in Barcelona, so
yeah, but you're limited to those borders of Catalonia. That's why. No, I'm kidding. So if you have Madrid is in the center, so Guadalajara is it was just northwest, not very far. But the power plant was another 100 clicks, I would say, from the town of Guadalajara. So it was in the middle of nowhere. And I landed up living there for personal reasons, as life will have it. And I was teaching English as a second language at that time. And I was teaching the training manager's son, the training manager at the nuclear power plant. And they do these massive audits after the Chernobyl. It's not audits. They're peer reviews. So they have experts that come from all over the world for 3 weeks. And they audit. It's like a friendly benchmarking exercise. And I hope I'm not saying it properly, but that's pretty much what they do. So they have experts from everywhere across the world. We had people from Argentina, China, Japan, Canada, the States, France. So imagine it was really a melting pot of individuals who were just thrown together to work for 3 weeks. And then there was a team of interpreters that ranged between 10 and 14 interpreters, sometimes more, depending on how big the team of foreign experts were. So you went to pretty much live and breathe nuclear interpretation for 3 weeks. And that was all like a great experience because when I started, I had nothing. And I was able to meet more seasoned interpreters and I learned about consecutive. I learned about AIC. I learned about, how to manage the whole thing. But more importantly, it was about learning how to work with people from across the world whose lingua franca was English. But that is a whole different ballgame because the lingua franca for a Chinese person versus a French person is not the same thing. So there are all the cultural aspects. And then you throw in the Spaniards, which is a whole other shebag of
But the
experiences.
technical, you mean you had no experience in terms of terminology, because one
No.
of the issues in interpretation is terminology, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
how do you
what.
manage that?
Yeah, learn on the fly. I mean, it required a lot of preparation because at the beginning you don't actually know which field you're going to be assigned to. So there's about 9 to 8 different fields, ranging from radiological protection all the way to more what they call organization and administration, but that encompasses HR and human error prevention tools, like a whole bunch of other components, and that's actually the easiest part. The more technical stuff has to do with the nuclear reactor, with the spent fuel pools. I mean, it was a huge learning experience. I had never been in a nuclear power plant in my life, and I was
Few people
able,
have.
yeah, and to see the the low, the storage where it's all stored and how it's stored and how it works with the drums and it's and learning about the different designs, the American design versus the German design versus the Canadian, the can do. So all these things, there's nothing. I'm not an engineer. I was told. I have a literature background. I mean, that's my thing. I read. I love to read. I love politics and whatnot. Everything that comes with language, English literature and understanding the context. But and as an engineer, that was not my thing. Nuclear reactors.
So
until then, yeah.
What years was that when you were in?
My God, you're gonna date me,
Yes, I'm dating you
yeah.
now.
My God, that was back.
No. It's radioactive. You're carbon dating her.
Oh my
right.
God, yeah. That was like 20 years. That was exactly 20 years ago.
When you started.
Yeah, when I started, I fell
Wow.
like completely into it. Yeah, but that wasn't my first. Like, now making me think that my first thing I was thrown in as an interpreter was around when I was living in Madrid. ETA was still terrorism was a thing that you talked about in Spain. They were still blowing up buses and banks in Madrid and whatnot. And I did this interpretation for a newspaper that refused to do any type of photography publication. So they were being interviewed to explain why, because it was they didn't want to give a platform to the terrorists. It was super interesting. So it was trying to fight to counter the terrorism, because ultimately what they were getting is like free marketing in the newspapers and the mass media. And there was this news outlet that was trying to do everything to not put in the headlines, to be part of the headlines, but not through the images, because that's what sells. And that's what they didn't want to do. So that was my first interpretation as a consec. And I always remember that the client had asked me, she said that she was going to do it, that she spoke English and that it would be fine. And that did not happen. So she quickly turned to me and she said at one point, could you stop using your notebook? And I was like, well, that's going to be interesting, because it was long consec with, I didn't have any training. So I was, jotting down some key dates and words to help me trot along. But it was at one point, she's like, oh, do you really need to use that? And I was like, well, yeah, I kind of need my notebook.
Yeah,
and then after I remember calling,
trade.
Yeah, and I remember calling one of my good friends, Andrea, who's like the super seasoned interpreter in Spain. And I was like, Andrea, the client was like telling me not to use my notebook. She's like, what are you talking? Can I say a Spanish word? Like, she's like, que gilipollas. And I'm like, well, yes, que gilipollas. Because I was like, what am I supposed to use? Like, I can use my fingers sometimes to like keep, okay, 4 things they said. I need to remember the 4 things. But yeah, so it was all at the same time. It kind of happened.
So consec is a big thing in Europe still.
Yeah, consec is a very big thing.
Because
I mean,
here, we don't have barely any consec, right?
It's not a thing. But for these for the nuclear world, it was very important, because a lot of the stuff was you were out you were out doing site visits. So you're walking around the nuclear power plant, so you can't really have equipment coming along, and
but you wouldn't have little transmitters.
Well, no, because you have to bring in some areas which are radiologically protected, so you have to check in and check out your equipment. So I mean, I had a radiological passport, so I would get scanned before going into power plant. Then I would, at the end of assignment, I would get scanned again to make sure that my millisievers were all in check.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Now that you've been into a nuclear power plant, which very few of us have, do you trust more nuclear energy or not?
I trust energy. I always have an issue with the human in any context. The issue is always the human being, because just stay out of it. Follow procedure. Do what you're told. Don't be creative sometimes. Sometimes you just, I think energy, nuclear energy, and we're going to see that in the future, because energy is going to be a key thing that we're all going to be vying and, if I may, fighting for. And Canada is we are a producer of uranium, which is something I learned as I was in Spain. which I did not know. So and there's a whole thing about energy. I mean, we have to keep up with those servers with the AI. We're going to even become more energy hungry, and somebody's going to have to, or something's going to have to feed that energy to those systems if we want to continue with the lifestyle that we have.
That's
My
it.
2 cents.
Cool. So,
Yep.
like, basically, like, how does it work 20 years ago and like leading up? Because there was no AI back then, and there's no like online terminology tools to help you get through all this.
Would you like to see my
Nuclear?
dictionary, my paper dictionary that I
Yeah,
still have?
Did you
had
still have it?
Yeah, I have two. I have a Spanish English one, and then I have a French English one. And
Okay.
I've never checked if they. Well, no, they have a PDF version of the Spanish one, and the French one I actually never checked because I actually bought it when I was back in Canada and I was doing some nuclear translations. So because there's in France there's I don't know like there's I don't know how many reactors they have many reactors. I don't 58 or something. Don't quote
Yeah.
me. Please do all people if anybody's
We'll
listening to
fact
this.
check later.
Yeah,
Don't
don't
worry.
fact check. Yeah,
Yeah,
don't
fact
hold it
checkers.
against me. But yeah, it's so yeah, it's paper based, and then working on that, reading through all the documentation. But what was actually, which I guess it's been a while, but what helped is that when I first started, I was part of the translation team. So even though I was going to be interpreting the assignment, the lead up to the to that was through translation, and that helped so much. And I know a lot of people are translators, interpreters, but I that was really cross functional because it helped me prepare for my assignment. Because then I got to read and to translate so many documents.
To have a base in translation when you're an interpreter is amazing. I mean, I can tell the difference between interpreters that have a base in translation and those who don't.
Yeah,
I
well,
think all three of us started that way, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
that's
yeah.
right.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you guys might agree with me is that a lot of the solutions that you need to find on the fly when you're interpreting. I mean, when you're translating, you can go make a coffee, think about it, come back, do a
That was our
search.
conversation with Joachim. He was like, "Oh, okay. Sometimes I get an email and they want to discuss for like an hour or two about a certain word or a comma
Yeah.
here or a comma there. We don't have time to do that."
Yeah, we don't
No.
have time to do that. That's the beauty of that's the beauty of in translation, but that's the beauty of interpretation. That's be quick on your feet. But having that background in translation, sometimes you have those solves top of mind because you've already done the work at one point in time. So then all of a sudden it's like, right, that's what I need to be using right now. Something something that's tightly packed, and that you're not going trying to think. You have it, and anyway. I just think
you're delivering the message, not
you're delivering a message. So
Yeah.
especially more like it's not words, it's more ideas. Sometimes when you can come up with these beautiful, especially French to English, we have such nice ways of packaging things. Not like these long redundant sentences that the French love to to paragraphs, never ending paragraphs. Woof. But in English you can just give it like it's bite-sized content. There you go.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
I think they're like the masters of acronyms too.
Yeah,
Everything's an acronym. Like,
yeah, well, yeah, that's I know
which
sometimes
sucks going the other way around.
I know majorly because it's like, wait, hold on, which acronym is that one again?
Yeah.
So the whole back then preparing for the assignments, it was all paper based. I mean, IATE, which is the EU database for terminology research, is fantastic, and that I mean the work that's been done to refine that is a fantastic resource that existed at the time. Lingui had just started, so that you could do some things, but the more technical stuff, it was a lot of collaboration, which was a great thing because with 3 weeks with people you don't necessarily know, on the interpreting side, and you're living in close quarters in remote areas, you learn how to communicate, you learn how to be. That's a big
So
one.
how did a typical day work? Did you go to the assignment in the morning, go back at night?
We start very early in the morning, and then we go. We start with a debrief, usually between what they call the two counterparts. So there would be a meeting, and then they would talk about what they'd seen the day before. They would just have a debrief, and then we go off and do what we need to do all day, and then we'd be out on the plant, either in meetings or.
And how many interpreters were there? Like a day of 2 or 3 interpreters?
No, when you were alone, you were alone with your people, with your 2 people, and you were
so you're
following them
taking care
everywhere.
by yourself of a team.
Yeah, so it's escort interpreting. So that's the beauty of nuclear interpreting. That's why when you had asked me, what's nuclear interpreting, what's this all about? It's not so much about the technical aspect. I think there's all the prep side there's a great tools to have in your toolbox, but then there's the modes of interpretation and that you need to know to use in different contexts. So there's escort interpreting, and then there's a whispering, and then there's a consec, short, long. And then there's a cultural mediation, which is something that comes from the healthcare sector. But that's also applicable when you're working in that environment because you're managing so many different types of cultures. And sometimes you need to know to intervene to make sure that there's no misunderstanding. And then that means you have to step out of your role as an interpreter. But you need to be very clear on when you're doing that. And you need to be very clear on why you're doing that in case it actually gets raised as an issue. The interpreter, was not interpreting, was more giving of an opinion. But then you need to be ready to justify why you did that. Because sometimes it can get tricky. Just I think about,
Do you have an example?
It's much more personal, I guess. Like when you're dealing with these people, like so
exactly.
directly,
Yeah.
and that like because ourselves, like we used a lot of terms there that maybe not all people who aren't in the interpretation industry don't necessarily know about. Escort interpretation is not exactly the escort that you're thinking of, maybe. So for beginners. So escort is basically interpretation is basically you're accompanying somebody and you're interpreting for them. You're their language provider, not some other type of provider. And then
that is correct, Brian.
And then consecutive is like, you wait, and long form is when someone's speaking for quite some time, you take notes and then you repeat it in the other language, or you transmit the message in the other language. Ourselves now in Canada, most of us use simultaneous interpretation. So we work inside these soundproof booths, and we have not as much contact as what you had in Spain with the client.
Right.
So you didn't have the privilege of having that glass between you and the client, so that like you can't be really questioned as much for what choice you're making. Which I find really interesting. So when was the first time that you went from, say, like the nuclear setting where you're doing consecutive and whisper and escort to simultaneous?
It was in nuclear, actually. So at one point, they decided to roll into the conference interpreting. So for the kickoff meeting and for the closing meeting, where there was a larger public, they decided the best mode, instead of using the bidule, it was to have the booth set up. So that was the first time I did that. And I did that in another power plant in Spain. And I remember spending hours and hours because I knew there was a very political message. It's because that's the other thing with split nuclear is you work with all types of people. You're interviewing foremen, you're working with the board, you're working with the CEOs, you're working with many different kinds of people. So you have to know what kind of language to use because it's not going to fly the same way, register wise. So I think that's also super interesting. But to answer your question, it was the first time I was in a booth, was for the nuclear. And that's when I realized that I wanted to have more professional training. And that's what led me to actually meeting Helen Campbell because I did a week training course that was offered at the University of Bath. So I went out for a week, and that's when I met Helen. She was one of the trainers, and she had spoken about the fact that Glendon was launching their program back in the day. I'm talking about back in the day. It's like before. Yeah. So that's what it was.
You're one of the OGs then, eh?
Yeah. So
we're connecting the dots here.
Yeah, exactly. So it was because I remember because when I did this training course, it was for UN exam preparation. You were talking to a person who, and I mean, I'm sure I'm going to make anyways, I'll skip my whole digression. But it was, I stepped in a booth, with a nuclear, but it was...
If you want me to cut something, I can do it later,
Okay, yeah, no. Well, it's because I know that a lot of some of the people will be like, oh my God, what are you doing in a booth without having any training? But it just so happened. But then I realized afterwards I wanted to have a more formal training just to help me be a better professional and to offer a better service. That was part of my continuous training vision of my life as an interpreter, because we're lifelong learners, whether we like it or not. Or if you don't like it, you shouldn't be an interpreter. All this to say that, so I went to Bath, and then it was interpretation. It was in a UN exam. But it was the only thing I could find that I could do like relatively soon, just to get, to get some skills. But I met these fantastic interpreters. Interpreters had worked for the ICC, for the the EU. And there was this, and there was two kinds of courts. There was the ones who had a little experience. Hi, my name Mercedes, and then the other ones who were IE, who had done there's just part of the refresher training, and it brought people from all walks of life, and it was super interesting. I had met this guy when I was in the first time I was in a booth with someone, and it was a big UN speech. I remember watching him, and that's when Helen Campbell always told me, and to this day I remember this: never fall under the weight of a speaker. Never. And
Can you explain that?
don't let the speaker or the speech, bring you down. Because sometimes when you're dealing with a fast speaker, without realizing it, your body language and it's reflected in your voice, you start kind of like becoming smaller. That's what happened to me, because I was so out of my depths that all of a sudden I could feel it. And then I remember saying, like, regardless of what's happening, keep your head afloat, but she's like, do not fall under the weight of the speaker. You have to, keep that. And to this day, I mean, I don't know how many years now.
What a great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a key. Like, I remember that. And although I was like, the water was somewhere around here, I remember that. And to this day, it's something that I try to remember. And all these little voices that I have in my head as a crazy person interpreting. Yes, that's the, I have her voice in my head. Try to, when you're dealing with some more heavy duty stuff. So yeah, that was like kind of the path of how things happen.
I do have a Helen's voice in my mind as well, but for something else. For me, it was when I first started as an interpreter, I was always like really super active and jumping almost like in the booth. I was like moving my hands and everything. I was like I was in the William Shatner School of Acting kind of thing. And
it so suits you though. You should have been an actor, Alain. Like, I say this with all the respect in the world. You should have been some sort of like comedian. Like, je te vois, c'est tellement clair pour moi. Anyway.
But anyway, long story short, when Helen saw that, like she was like, okay, turn it down a notch or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I still remember to this day when she told me, like, if somebody's at 10, be at 7 or 8,
Yeah.
And you don't need to, if they're screaming, you don't need to scream. You can have an intense voice, and everyone in the audience heard them scream. You don't need to do that at all.
You don't need to yell in their ear as well.
Exactly. Or over exaggerate what someone has said.
Right.
Yeah. You also run the risk. You also run the risk of smacking the microphone and giving something an acoustic shock or something.
Or your colleague that could
smack your colleague. Jeez.
Yesterday I was in a booth at Centre des Congrès de Québec, and I'm so used to this setup, right? My microphone here and everything. And yesterday I was like, I forgot how to work the console, and suddenly I wanted to change language, and then I hit my microphone. I was like, oh my God, this is a different setting. So
it's a spatial awareness.
Yes,
that's what I always tell the stepkids. But hey, we learn. But that's great advice too that Helen gave. I'm going to keep that one too, because that's true. Sometimes it's gauging how much to give or to hold back.
Brian, do you have a piece of advice as well to share?
About booth ethics? I think I think it would be interesting to do a whole podcast about that, because there's the code of ethics that the AIC has on paper at their website and stuff, and then there's the one that we have between ourselves, like don't bring stinky food into the booth, like that kind of thing. So I think it'll be
don't get me started on that one.
It's gonna be
with the permission of my colleague, if I get it,
yes.
I will tell you a story of how it did not go well, because it was like, do not bring food in the booth because you will lose your plate.
That's right. It will fly out of the booth as quickly as you came in.
Well, if there's waiters walking around, it's like, are you done?
Yes, she's done. Oh, do we both know it's a she?
I'm sorry for laughing in the
Do I have to edit that part?
We're getting in way too much trouble here.
Yeah.
Guys, I haven't said anything. You guys are looking for trouble here, okay?
Let's back it up back to the nuclear stuff.
Let's go back. Yeah, let's go back. Yeah, so
we just pulled a Homer Simpson from the...
We did. Yeah. Oh, man, I felt like Homer Simpson throughout the whole process. Every time I went to the control room, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, why am I the one interpreting this? Because I did a lot of training, which is also cool. You go into a simulator of a control room. So you see them, they're all getting trained, all the operators, the reactor, it's amazing to see everything that they have to know, learn, and do. So that was pretty cool also to be in a simulator. They had teams. I remember when they had a team coming from Brazil that were using the simulator in Madrid, because the company at that time, they were responsible for all the nuclear training, and they had the same type of control room out in Brazil. And they would come in, but then they would put all the name tags in Portuguese, and then when the next team would come in, they would get rid of them. Anyway, so it's just really, it was just a cool. It was such a learning experience that no school would have been able to provide me with.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I am for education, but like the hands-on, seeing something that is so not part of your world, it is so important, because it forces you to take a step back and also realize how to be in those environments, how to act, because that's also something else I find that is very cross-functional is because as interpreters, and especially if you're working for yourself, you need to know how to be, whether it especially with clients, and when you're like client facing, without meaning to be client facing, you do represent an agency, you represent someone, and then it's even more important, and yourself, and how to be, the etiquette. So it's not just like booth etiquette. There's also etiquette in how to be, and not everybody knows how to be. It's all because we're an interesting breed, interpreters. I have to say, we're all like.
Well, I can tell you that one time I saw a guy coming with a baseball cap and a T-shirt, and I was like, "Who are you?" And I was dressed, with a shirt and tie. And back in the day, everyone was wearing a tie, so I was wearing a tie too. And I looked at the guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's pre-COVID.
Yeah, pre-COVID. And I looked at the guy and I was like, "Who are you?" And he's like, I'm the interpreter." And I'm like, "No, you're not. You're Stone Cold Steve Austin." Because he was bald and was wearing a T-shirt and everything. He looked like, and I was like, "Well, I said, look around you." I said, "Look at everybody's like well dressed and everything.
Yeah,
you look the part." I said,
you have to we, of course, in the post-COVID world that we live in, there's been a more lax approach to dressing. Women can get away with more than men. No,
if I'm on site, I'll wear a shirt and a jacket.
You look sharp all the time, Alain. Sorry, you. There's a standard, people. Anybody who's watching this, you got to follow his style. He looks sharp when he's on site. Sometimes I look down and I'm like, oh my God, I need to go figure this out.
For a guy, it's easy. It's a shirt, a jacket, and a pair of pants, and nice shoes. It's very basic, I think, if you look at, politicians or whatever, they always wear this. Like Obama was never changing his suit. He was always wearing the same one, or maybe the same color.
Yeah,
they have just to make sure that he wouldn't have to think about anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's like Batman. He only has
one. Exactly.
He's like, you see all the same.
They're all the same. Yes.
Yeah, all the same.
What would Batman do?
What would Batman do? I'm sort of asking myself that.
He has all the tools and all the weapons and stuff that we use too. But
little digression.
Great for analogies. Last week I was doing stuff on sports. I don't even follow hockey.
Well, that's pivoting. It's that environment. In nuclear, for example, I always remember once I was told it was going to be a boardroom meeting, so I dressed up for a boardroom meeting, which meant wearing a dress and heels and nylons. I get there. It turns out it's going to be a site visit.
You changed. I've never seen you with nylons. I think.
Well, maybe if I did escort interpreting, no. Sorry.
This was back in the day, Anna.
Back in the day. I was younger. No, so I was, it's practical because then you're not there with the suit. It was just easy to go. Anyway, stretchy jersey material works fantastically.
But you were in Spain. People are more fashionable in Europe.
Oh my God, people are so much more fashionable.
This is North America. People go in their pajamas to a conference.
Every time I go to Madrid and visit my friends, I leave a different person. I come back with a whole different wardrobe. My friends are they change 3 times a day. They have their clothes for their work. They come home and they dress, and they don't change into their sweatpants. No. This is what they call a la americana. That is for the gym. Then they have their outfits for if they go out in the evening. It's a whole different ballgame.
I'm the same. I do the same.
Yeah, but you've got that thing. That's why you wear what you wear to work.
Hey.
You got that thing.
There's a song about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. They're sure. Well, all this today. So I'm supposedly doing a boardroom. I'm thinking, okay, but then it was right after Fukushima, so they're doing the stress test. So
I remember.
Yeah, so they were doing all the nuclear power plants had to do stress tests. So we were going around. I had to be climbing in and out of these manholes in my dress, which was the most and of course you have to wear your PPE, so your personal protection equipment. But it did not exactly jive with the dress. And I remember, back in the day, power plants didn't even have women's bathrooms or locker rooms. So just imagine, this is where I learned how to develop more of a carcasse, because you got to learn how to stand your ground when you're in an environment of ring knockers. And that is something that you'll learn, as younger, not unprepared, but a bit green around the edges. You learn how to figure out how to read people. So yeah, that was an experience to make sure you kind of need to know what kind of environment you're going in.
So how do you go from exotic Spain and nuclear power plants to Montreal? Nothing against Montreal, but it's not that exotic.
Well, so Montreal is my hometown. I was born and raised here. This is where the family is. My dad, he's it's
But you have some Spanish ancestry.
yeah, my father. So my father, the whole Spanish side comes from my dad. My dad is Spanish, and was studying languages and literature at Dawson College here in Montreal, and I was taking supposedly an intensive course. I remember going home. My dad never spoke to us in Spanish. He would scold us in Spanish, or my mom and my dad would speak together in Spanish, even though my mom's not Spanish.
That's
But
when you know you're in trouble, eh? When they
yeah, I know, yeah, that was my brother and I. I'd be like, we're out of
yeah.
here. Uh-oh, dad is speaking in Spanish, yelling in Spanish. So I learned all the like swear words, the little tacos. I learned those very early on, and like before I could actually probably make a sentence in Spanish.
Hey,
Yeah,
it's like my kids. I speak to them in French, but when I scold them, it's in Quebecois.
yeah, you pull, yeah, you get it all out. Yeah, so I was like, okay, so I went home to visit, and then my dad was like, "Get that," and I'm like, "What?" I'm like looking
What
through
did I
my.
do?
I'm like, "What is this?" And he's like, well, he said something in Spanish too, and I remember like I was like, "Eres gilipollas, okay?" Like you're supposedly taking a Spanish intensive, and you don't even know what "get that" is. And I got so frustrated with it that I said, to hell with this. I'm gonna go get my Spanish passport because I have dual citizenship. Dual citizenship. I went to the consulate in Montreal, went to get my passport, booked a one-way ticket to to Madrid, and went to hang out in the Madrid to learn Spanish. I had family there. All my dad's siblings lived in Madrid or in Spain. So I went to set up shop for 10 months. I was like, okay, I'll take a break from
What
CJ.
year was that? Can you just like in a timeline?
Oh my God, hold on. This was
20 years
like,
ago.
1920, 2000? I was a
That
kid.
okay. Wow.
I was
yeah.
a kid. Yeah. And
But
I
it
was,
helps me to see the picture in my mind.
yeah, I was a kid, man. I was like,
So your father's loving words inspired you to do Spanish.
yeah, my father's, yes, very Spanish.
Tough love. Tough love.
This is very
Tough love.
Spanish, also, though. And I was like, okay, I'm out of here. And then I spent like 3 months not speaking. But so something in common with your guest from last week. I'm a former rugby player, so I didn't screw up my knees. I screwed up my back. But so that's what I went to do. So I went to learn Spanish and play rugby. That's what I did for a whole year and work. I worked in teaching English to kids that year, but it was all kind of a whole experience. And it brought me back actually to when I was a kid, because when I went to school in English, I didn't speak English. I mean, I remember pointing my name tag and being like, where am I supposed to go? Like, did not speak a word of English. And I was in that position
when you were
again.
a kid?
Yeah, I was a kid. Yeah, we didn't speak English at home. We still don't, like, French was
But you went to the English school system in Quebec.
Yeah, because my mom had le droit acquis, so my brother and I could have an English education. And my parents wanted us to be bilingual, so since we spoke French at home, they shipped us off to English school, and that's what happened.
Bilingual plus the swear words in Spanish.
Yeah, exactly. Until I finally learned Spanish, and even then, a lot of it was very swear
That's why you call
word.
Spanish your swear language.
Yeah, well, you see me, and I get.
I know.
You see the Quebecois.
I know. I have seen.
I know.
We'll keep it for the after-hour podcast.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so it's all started from that, from this this willingness to want to learn another language, and I wanted to learn a language. I didn't want to just spit out a few words and pretend to speak a language. I wanted to be fully speak it, master the language. And actually, what helped me, or what even encouraged me more, is when I landed in Madrid, I met this Brit who'd been living there for 20 years, and his Spanish was, I'm very grateful for the work he gave me. He was a very nice man, but he's like, how can you be married to a Spanish woman and speak like that? I said, I will never do that. I was like, that was my goal, and I achieved it. So to the point that actually my French was, my Spanish when I left Spain was like an A, like a very B.
But when you were in Spain, didn't you think of doing some interpreting schools I know that you went to, you were tempted by Glemden, but or you did study at Glemden. I'm sorry about that. But were you tempted by some schools in Spain? Like, for instance, I went to La Autónoma in Barcelona. What about there? Didn't you think about doing that?
No, because the problem is that for me to do that, I would have had to do what they, ¿cómo se llama eso? There's this exam that you have to do when you finish your high school, la selectividad. And I would have had to study for a whole year in academy to classes that I had never taken. There was no equivalency that would allow me to go straight to the university.
You couldn't go straight to university.
No, that's why I went to the University of London. That's why I got an education from the UK.
Oh, wow. And
Yeah,
that's where you met
so it's
Alan
like
Campbell?
London, like not London, Ontario, but London.
England, yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
Well,
where
London,
you met
a bit
England.
Alan
more
Campbell.
a bit better.
A bit more, yeah, a bit more exotic. So since I was able to do it, like it was like a hybrid model, so I could do it from, remote from Madrid, and I would go in for the exams or whatnot, and that was another thing that I
Hold on,
learned.
it was remote?
Yeah, so I did
Back in what year?
2002, 4, whatever it was.
A
Yeah,
Wow.
remote program in 2002 wasn't
yeah.
Zoom.
University, no, it was completely remote, like in the sense that you get your books, like your curriculum, and you have to
Okay.
study on your own. You don't actually attend any classes. No, no, no. It's not like London where you had your online classes and you'd have your, like online presence, and then
We
you
were
do your.
pampered. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, no. This was a whole different ballgame, but that's what actually helped me, not helped me, but where I was able to really develop a study method work, because there was nobody telling me what I needed to study, kind of, but not really, and I just had to show up the exam and make sure that I had studied what I needed, because otherwise it was going to be a no-go. So that was a different. Also, my education, my pathway is not conventional at all.
No. Because when did you do
Most
Glendon?
interpreters isn't.
Yeah, that was back in 2000. I was 20. There was 20.
You're one of the first
20
cohorts, I think, right?
No, I was so for Glendon. No, sorry, I thought you were asking about University of London. No, for Glendon, I was in 2000. I had to
No, it
look
was
at my
after
diploma.
Olivier.
Yeah, it was after 2 years. I think I've after Olivier, because
Wasn't it 2017 or something like that, Joanne?
no, it was before. It was
Oh, really?
10 years. It was 10 years ago.
Okay.
2000. Hold on, let me see. So I came back.
That was
I need to calculate
2014.
because I have to think, because my dogs are everything is based on my dog's age, because I came
Perfect.
back with them from Spain.
Just don't
So
multiply by 7.
I know. So I just exactly. Well, so I'm trying to figure out. So I did the first year, 2 years, 3 years. So 10 years ago. So yeah, it was 2014.
And now you're doing a master's in translation?
No, it's
Oh.
it's a graduate diploma in
A graduate-
translation
Wow.
that I started. But the issue is that I have the classes are they interrupt, or some are evening assignments. So I've had a hard time committing to that. But that was a super interesting experience as well. They have a private dictionary that you have to work on developing terms, not developing, getting them added to the dictionary or updating them, and with
Like
no legal,
like being a terminologist.
terminology. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
had to work on this, what they call the fish. So that was great, because I was reading all this civil French law, but from France, where to understand how, how a term can be used and its implications in a legal context. And that was a fantastic experience, because I was able to work with law students and with the professor, one of the professors of the faculty of law at McGill. And that was a whole different other experience as well. But I
Wow.
wanted to learn, and that was where it helped me up my French, because the problem is I'm always balancing the languages. I really do not know how people, how they stay sane, because my Spanish, when it gets activated, it kind of kicks off the French, and then it's like struggling to reclaim it's very Spanish, actually, conquistador. It just was but yeah, it was a great experience to learn about many things, about the reason why, and the legal systems, and the legal system in Quebec and its foundations, which all links back to Roman law. So that was a huge, it was a beautiful experience. And I also learned, which my favorite class was the drafting judges' decisions. That was
Wow.
my
Okay.
favorite thing in the whole wide world. That was taking a decision that had been kind of drafted, and then cleaning it up and reorganizing, using all the principles that the judges use. That was a
Yeah.
fantastic exercise, and that's when I got really interested in the whole legal.
Oh, well, when we're doing, you've done you've interpreted for the training for judges on how to write a verdict, right?
Yeah, well, I have all the books. I have all the things that they talk about. That's why I remember once being reading my mag. I'm like, I actually know what they're talking about this time. This is something I actually
and
know.
then you were like, Alan, let me take over. Let me do it now.
Yeah,
I know what you're
exactly.
talking
I'm
about.
I know what they're talking about. The point first, the different versions
Yes.
of that, and
The
yeah. So
necessity d'abord and all that.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I had done the course. I had
Good.
done. So it was.
That's why I send you guys to all these legal conferences.
Yeah,
See?
thank you.
Well, thank
yeah.
you.
Well,
You
no,
and-
it
UN
feeds
Language
it.
Services just hires all the best. This is what it is.
Oh, that's all it is. It's I take that. I will have a glass of wine to celebrate that comment after.
Absolutely.
As I said, for all the nights that I wake up in the middle being like, I should have said this Why didn't I think of that?
I
have
know
these
we're
moments.
perfectionists too, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. Lifelong learner and having to, always wanting to like pour chercher le mot juste, which is something you have to give up. That's a battle I have to give up because sometimes
Yes.
I'm like, le mot juste, il vient pas, alors oublie-le. Too bad, so sad.
Yeah.
Another day.
Well, you memorize it and you'll remember it for next time.
Oh yeah, I know. That's the best part because then it's like you'll never forget it. Then
No.
that's the great thing. That's the best thing. Anyway, well, so we totally digress in many directions, but I hope I've answered some of your questions. I don't know what else I could talk to you about.
I have my second question now. IAEA is the International Atomic Energy Agency. That was my
Correct.
second question, but you know what? It's been already 40 minutes.
Yeah, well, just quickly. So those are like entities that I would have never had a chance to work with if it hadn't
That's
been for interpreting.
incredible.
Yeah, with they're a big player, and you have to think is there's also the UK like the regulator because you learn all about all the different entities, and a lot of the Brits, for example, the Americans, a lot of them are all from the armed forces. They're all nuclear engineers.
Sorry to interrupt, but if someone is listening to us and they're just starting their career and they would like they have Spanish, a strong foundation in Spanish, or maybe even native Spanish speakers, and they want to apply for all of these wonderful opportunities in Europe, what would you say?
Well, go the website like I'll get it right, the International Atomic Energy Agency, because I was going to say
the IAEA.
The IAEA, yeah, because I was going to say
I'm not smart. I just read it.
EIEIO.
Yeah. Well, all this to say, yeah, it's a UN body. So you go on this and they hire people. They have their offices are in Vienna. So anybody who's really looking to do something different, I mean, look, there's great opportunities out there. Send your CV, apply, do the test. In my case, this was on the private market, so it's indirectly working for them because they're the experts coming from those places. So it's the power plants that are responsible for providing the services.
So it was an agency, just like many of us work in agencies.
Yeah, and I have the call. When I think Lou was just so this is this guy from Winnipeg who's like half Catalan who organizes all this. He's in Catalonia. He has his business, and even though he was,
hold on, you said Winnipeg.
Yeah, but he was born. He's from Winnipeg.
He's from Winnipeg, but now he lives in Catalonia.
But his parents were Catalonia, like they were from Catalonia. So that's So it's just funny.
In Europe, it's the same model. It's just like here. There are some agencies that will provide work to interpreters, and then you just apply to certain agencies, and if they trust you, they'll give you some work.
Yeah,
same thing.
Yeah, same process.
What about the working conditions?
Ooh,
like 2 or 3 interpreters. No, 2 or 3 interpreters.
European.
So there's European standards, and then there's Spanish standards. Like Spain has always been known as a different market. There's like, there's like an A. When somebody had explained it to me, as like the A, B, and C. A being the IE game, B being not the gray market, but like getting as close as possible to the IE conditions, and then C just being the gray market. So that was.
Let's not compare it to names we know.
Is there a black market?
Oh yeah, and there's a black market in like okay, you can cut things out in the nuclear, like massive. I mean,
nuclear?
Yeah, because
there's a security issue here.
No, but I'll give. So this, I don't know. Okay, this is off the books. I hope this isn't getting included in the recording. But what happens is that imagine you have 15 days with 12 or 14 interpreters per day. Do the math. Even if they're gray market or black market. It is such a like an amount of money that's why it leads to the black market, because sometimes as long as they have half the team that knows what they're doing, the other half doesn't need to know what they're doing, because then they can just be, the excuse will be, well, because not everybody wants to go to a nuclear power plant and work a nuclear power plant and be
People always be scared of.
Well, it's not just that; it's having to hang around and living in the same place with like other strangers for 3 weeks. I mean, you can get, sometimes depending, you can go home if you want, but it's not something that everybody wants to do. And conference interpreters sometimes don't want to do that work because it stops them from actually doing the conference work that is happening in Madrid and in Barcelona and Valencia and whatnot. So
wait, were you serious? Did you want me to cut the previous part?
Yeah, maybe, because I don't know if I'll get shot. I don't want to be blacklisted.
Hold on a second. Let's have 3 seconds. And we're back. We had to cut some part here. Okay, let's move on.
Sorry, I have to be careful. And we're back.
And we're back. Sorry, it's
so yeah, so it's
you have
it's
to. We'll go get a Patreon for those who pay. They'll hear it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, exactly. I have to have a no disclaimer. But yeah, also all this to say the working conditions. I mean, that you strive for what what is the A game, and that's what you want ultimately. Because I mean, there's of course there's different conditions that can lead to different things, but ultimately try to aim for the A game because some things are super intense. Just some things require so much like preparation. There's somebody the other day was telling me, oh, work day is 8 hours, and I'm like, yeah, well, you have to add on your prep. Like I was like, some conferences require quite a lot of prep, so you're not doing an 8-hour day. You're doing an 8-hour shift, but then you're going home and off the clock. You're technically preparing for whatever you have to do the next day, if you have something the next day, and that any assignment requires preparation. I've never understood. I mean, you have to have something. You have to have looked at the agenda at least. I mean, don't tell me you haven't looked at the agenda, which I've heard, which is
Yeah, it happens. Because
it
like even
happened.
like, but even like you're right. Because like even myself, when I lived in Milton, Ontario, it's an hour train ride to Toronto every day. So if I do a 5-day conference in Toronto, I'm spending 2 extra hours on the train, and usually
Right.
I'm like studying up to make sure that that I'm gonna get the day right. And then
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you're debriefing in your mind, like on the train, and now with
Yeah.
like Wi-Fi and everything, you're double checking everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, the day never stops really
Yeah,
for us.
you're connected the entire time. That's why I love the episode that you did, on not self care per se, but the taking. We have a burden, and it's not just a cognitive burden of our jobs, but afterwards, it's like as an independent worker and as an business owner, you're always there's things that need to be dealt with, and
Absolutely.
you can't just check out. And if you want to be prepared for your work, depending on the work, unless you've done this client in the past or the conference in the past,
Yeah,
then
if you're really used to it.
if
Yeah.
you're used to it, because and that's a great thing. That's what great those seasoned interpreters have that that chance as you build that knowledge and you build that is there for you to use when you need to use it. So it's
But
also
the
juggling.
burden is also on the shoulders of the client. Sometimes you get your PowerPoint about 3 minutes before it starts, or even then.
Or even during or after the
Yes.
Yeah.
fact. It's
We're almost out of time, but I've got a rapid fire question to ask just to conclude. First, are you hopeful for the future as an interpreter?
yeah, of course I am. You
Cool.
have to be. You have to be.
That's
Why?
no.
Back
I'm
to you.
just.
What do you think?
I think we're 2025 because it's time to reflect what happened in 2024, and now we're heading to 2025, and I couldn't be more hopeful of the future because
Yeah.
a lot of I think that when I think of 2024, a lot of the people have been talking a lot about AI and all of these things, and I don't know, like sometimes I hear some interpreters that are not so hopeful about the future, and I'm like, no, actually, you know what? I see us having a great year in 2025. So that's why I wanted
Well, I
to do
hope so,
a little roundtable to ask around.
but I was listening to the episode with Ahmed, and he was talking about the work that they do at the ICC, and it was, that voice that you give to people.
Yeah.
AI can that human experience, that emotion,
Yeah.
determining the how you want to transfer a message that can be so personal. I'm not sure we're there yet. That's when we say, you know what, if we're not there yet, and for the AI to succeed, it needs data. It needs our data as interpreters, whatever exists in the world that will feed into the creation of the AI. So will only depend on the quality of the data, and that's being something that's taught across all sectors. So we're not there just yet, and the confidentiality. There's lots of things that are in play. I know some people will just want to be able to reduce costs, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be cheaper. Anyways, I can talk about this for many hours.
Yes,
I will
absolutely.
We'll invite you again to another episode.
a
Don't worry
round
about it.
table where if
Yes.
you want an opinion, you know my number.
And all her contact information will be at the bottom of the description of this.
Well, more for you guys. No, I don't know.
We already know your contact information. We don't need you. Hey, it was a real pleasure having you, Mercedes. And it was like I would love to talk to you for more, for longer on this, but unfortunately, yeah, Alain's right. Our time's up.
Yeah,
But
well, thank
this
you.
was so much fun. And yeah, Alain, any final words?
Everyone, please like and share. We the podcast is getting incredibly popular. at least to our level as interpreters, because we're a very niche topic. But please share. Don't forget there's also the previous episodes to watch as well. Subscribe, comment, and we read all of them. I can tell you that. And I would
Alain
like
reads
to.
them all, and he just tells me about it.
Well, yeah, I do some screen captures and I send them to Brian.
Do a triage.
Yeah, and Mercedes, thank you so much for coming with us this week.
Wow,
It's always a
my
pleasure. This is like, I think, the fastest of 50 minutes that we've done so far.
So it went very fast. Yes, and you're an
Brian.
inspiration to other interpreters, Mercedes. Thank you
I
so
hope
much
so.
again.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the invite, guys. It's a pleasure, and have a great happy holidays.
Yeah.
All right.
Cheers,
Good day,
everyone.
good night, and good luck.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.